Hey guys, tonight we slip into a quiet 19th century Japanese hamlet where lanterns spill honeyed light onto wooden verandas and the air hums with cicada echoes. You probably won't survive this without craving exactly one more cuppa. But don't worry, it's a gentle kind of insomnia cure, like hugging a pillow made of moonbeams. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Feel free to post your location and local time in the comments so we can all sigh together in unison. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step barefoot across the polished wooden floor of a dim tea house, your sandals left by the sliding shoji door. Lanterns swaying from the rafters illuminate low tables where villagers cradle steaming cups of mugwort-infused tea. The steam curls upward, carrying herbal bitterness and a whisper of earth. Historians note that mugwort yomogi was a mainstream sedative in Meiji-era Japan, prescribed by folk healers to ease anxious minds before bed. Its gentle bitterness, some say, mimicked the taste of roasted chestnuts. Hard to imagine insomnia after that analogy. You slide onto a straw-filled zabuton cushion beside an elderly woman in an indigo kimono, whose hands are weathered like cracked maple bark. She offers you a cup, her fingers brushing yours in a transfer of warmth. A fringed tidbit passes between her cracked lips. Some whispered that certain tea leaves were harvested only under a full moon soaked in dew overnight, and these moon-kissed leaves could induce dreams of long-lost lovers. Historians still argue whether moon-harvested herbs contained any more active compounds or simply made for more romantic market tales. The murmur of other patrons fades as you raise the bowl to your lips. The mugwort's aroma is grassy, a million green fields rolling gently under your nose. You sip, cheeks prickling. A light joke tickles your tongue. If kombucha ever tasted this nuanced kale smoothies, would be extinct by now. You feel the warmth pool in your belly, radiating outward like the embers of a dying hearth. Across the low table, a young poet in sepia robes rests a brush beside a parchment strip. He's scribbling a koan-like verse. What is the river's voice when sleep drifts downstream? He reads it aloud, voice a soft murmur against cicada choruses. You lean in, sensing the nocturnal cadence. Mainstream accounts confirm that reciting contemplative poetry before sleep was common among Edo period literati believed to focus the mind's wanderings. Yet fringe lore insists some villagers believed that a perfectly phrased koan verse could unlock lucid dreams, though scholars still argue whether that ever happened outside of monks' cloisters. You turn back to your tea, noticing how lantern light plays across the tea's surface, shimmering like a tiny koi pond. Your eyes trace the ripples. It's all so serene until a sudden sneeze from the poet flips you out of reverie and back into modern reality. You snort softly. If someone invented bottled hush for sneezeless evenings, I'd invest immediately. A bamboo ladle clinks against a water basin in the corner. A tea house hostess in saffron robes dips it, refilling your cup without a word. You watch droplets drip in slow motion, each one a tiny clock, marking the pause between breaths. That's the kind of timekeeping no watch offers, fluid forgiving and slightly damp. You feel your shoulders loosen, as if the world's weight has slipped off like an ill-fitting obi. Nearby, a child in turquoise yukata yawns into a folded fan, her eyes half closed. She rests her head on her grandfather's lap, listening to his croaked narration of a mountain hermit fable. The grandfather's voice is like dry leaves underfoot, whispery but oddly soothing. A second light joke drifts. If bedtime stories sounded like crunchy autumn leaves, I'd never need white noise machines. Between sips, you notice the tea house's wood-block prints along the walls, plum blossoms drifting on wind cranes poised mid-flight. You recall that many artists believed such imagery displayed in sleep chambers could tire the eyes just enough to invite rest. Historians still argue whether visual stimuli truly affected sleep onset or if it was simply the room's overall calm that mattered. Your final sip leaves a thin green stain on your lips. You place the bowl down and exhale. The hostess empties her movements, nearly imperceptible fluid, respectful, serene. You realize you've been holding your breath, tracking the steam's ascent like a patient scientist. Now you let it go in a sigh that seems to harmonize with the tea house's distant cuckoo clock. You rise quietly, stepping back onto the veranda. Lantern glow frames your silhouette against the night sky, and you catch the faint scent of jasmine carried in from a nearby garden. The world outside is hushed, cradled by moonlight, and warmed by the memory of mugwort's embrace. You might not survive a caffeine binge after that brew, but here on the threshold between wake and sleep, you're wonderfully suspended. You tuck the koan verse into your pocket as if carrying a secret lullaby. As you slide the shoji closed behind you, the lantern light dims, replaced by the vast indigo beyond. You take one last deep breath of lantern-sweetened air, ready to drift as tea leaves settle dreams, beckon, and the tea house's gentle trance carries you home. You step from the cool night air into the warmly lit ofura room where cedar-scented steam curls like lazy dragons around polished hinoki planks. You probably won't survive this without slathering rosemary-infused oils across your shoulders, but don't worry, it's a soothing kind of medieval hydrotherapy, like a scented hug in lukewarm water. As you ease into the deep wooden tub, the heat envelopes you, pressing out every last tension knot from your muscles. Mainstream wisdom notes that by the mid-19th century in Japan, adding aromatic herbs like rosemary being imported through Nagasaki trade routes to communal bathhouses was common practice to calm frayed nerves and encourage restful sleep. You lean back against the tub's curved edge, your neck supported by a rolled linen pillow, and inhale the herb's piney bite, mingling with cedar steam. It's earthy, like a forest in mid-rain, and you feel your eyelids grow heavy as though each droplet were a lullaby note. A fringe tidbit drifts. Some bathhouse regulars claimed that if you whispered a koan, like "What is the color of the wind?" into the rosemary oil, before adding it to the water, the scent would carry the question into your dreams, aiding introspection. Historians still argue whether such scented cones ever circulated beyond a few eccentric, monk-run bathhouses, or were simply playful legends that made for good gossip under towel stalls. The tub's water laps softly at your elbows as you swirl a handful of crushed rosemary leaves between your fingers. You close your eyes and imagine the leaves as tiny boatmen rowing you toward sleep's harbor. A light joke flits: if my tea bag ever rowed me to dreamland, this effectively, I'd never need a bedtime story. You shift to test the water's edge, toes flexing, and discover it's perfect, warm enough to relax without triggering sweat, just like that Goldilocks porridge your body demands. Nearby, a bath attendant in indigo hakama carries a wooden bucket of cool spring water, ladling gentle streams over bruised muscles and weary shoulders. You feel the cool drips counterbalance the bath's heat, like a second metronome guiding your breath. Inhale with warm submersion, exhale with cool release. The attendant hums a low melody, probably a lullaby excerpted from a Zen chant, and you can't help but feel cradled by both water and song. Between sips of warm bath tea served in porcelain cups, you notice another bather in a saffron yukata kneeling at the tub's edge, methodically rinsing a cloth in the rosemary-scented water. She wipes her face with slow, deliberate strokes. You realize that this ritual cleansing was a mainstream recommendation in Edo medical texts believed to remove more than just dirt. It washed away mental cobwebs too. Historians still argue whether such facial rituals had measurable effects on sleep quality or were simply symbolic gestures reinforcing the bath's restorative power. A second light joke surfaces. If my facial mist offered this level of existential clarity, I'd spray it before every meeting. You lean forward and dip the cloth in the herbal water, patting it over your temples. The cool dampness snaps your senses awake for a single heartbeat before the steam tugs you back toward relaxation. Glancing around, you see bamboo shelves lined with earthenware jars of other botanicals, ginger yuzu peel, and even powdered adzuki beans. A sign in flowing calligraphy suggests rotating herbs based on the lunar calendar to align body rhythms with moon phases. A fringe rumor claims some bathhouses timed herb rotations to eclipse seasons, believing that a rare herb blend could stave off insomnia for a full lunar cycle. Scholars still argue whether such timing actually improved sleep or simply sold more fragrant soaks to curious townsfolk. You submerge fully, now water just below your chin, and let your arms float. The tub's walls cradle you. Your face is a mask of relief. You imagine that floating is like being a sleep-starved poet, drifting through the void of ideas. Each herb-scented ripple, a gentle muse, urging you to rest. From behind a Norin curtain, you hear the steady click of Gita footwear on wooden flooring. A latecomer arrives bowing slightly before sliding open the door. She carries a small bronze bowl, the same type used in monastery chants, which she places on the tub's veranda. The attendant pours a little extra hot water into it and strikes it with a lacquered mallet. The bowl's sustained ring resonates through the steam, a sonic pulse mapping time in sound rather than shadow. It reminds you of the gongs you heard by the shadow stick, later another blend of measurement and melody. A third light joke drifts. If my smartphone's alarm could sound like a temple bowl, I might actually wake up before hitting snooze. You watch the sound wave shimmer in the tub's surface, the ring fading slowly as droplets disperse. Your limbs feel new lighter, as if the water has absorbed the day's weight. You cradle your knees, hugging them to your chest, in a self-soothing gesture, and let your chin rest on folded arms. The steam envelops your world into gauzy softness. Up above, the paper lantern glow blurs into golden halos, making you feel like a budgie perched in a night-lit aviary. A gentle knock on the sliding door signals your time's end. The attendant sets down a wooden bucket of cool rinse water by your feet. You squeeze the tub's edge and stand water cascading off in thin streams. Stepping onto the bamboo mat, You wrap yourself in a linen robe that smells faintly of cold sake, a promised reward for insomniac souls. The scent is bracing like the best kind of coffee. Except it's bedtime. You pad down a short hallway, lined with washy screens painted with moonlit plum blossoms. The screens cast hazy patterns on your robe as you pass. You pause by a ceramic basin in a moonlit nook, tipping water over your wrists and throat. The cool liquid snaps a final bolt of alertness through your spine before subsiding. Emerging into the courtyard, you see the full moon suspended above a rock garden, where raked pebbles mimic flowing water. The gardener's morning tanka is etched on a stone plaque. Quiet pond moon's calm reflection beckons drifting heart to rest. You recognize that reciting or even reading such poems before sleep was mainstream among literate townsfolk, binding written word and nocturnal peace. You whisper the verse under your breath as you find your sandal rack. Sliding into your foot wraps, you notice the soft click of your steps on flagstones, cool as jade. You inhale deeply, carrying the evening's rosemary vapor and cedar embrace back into your body. You feel like a vessel, refilled each herb-scented strand of your being rewoven into slumber's loom. One final light joke: if only my house slippers smelled this divine, I'd never betray bedtime again. Before you slip behind the house's sliding door, you look back at the Ofro room's lantern glow drifting in the courtyard mist. You imagine the gardeners raking circles in the pebble pond, the water clock's peg paused at midnight, the bowl's ring lingering in the air. All these gentle rituals have merged into a single rhythm, one that pulses in time with your own slowing heartbeat. You close the door and step into the hallway's dim hush, ready at last to let steam and song guide you into the deepest dream. You slip past the sliding Norin into the silent temple veranda, where paper lanterns sway gently in the night breeze and the wooden floorboards creak under your barefoot steps. You probably won't survive this without the echo of whispered paradoxes spinning around your skull. But don't worry, it's the kind of mental puzzle that lulls you toward sleep as effectively as any lullaby. In your hand, you clutch a narrow scroll of koan-like verses, their calligraphy dancing in the lantern's warm glow. A mainstream fact: by the late 19th century, Zen monasteries in Kyoto regularly taught koan recitation as a nightly exercise, believing that resting with paradoxical questions such as "What is the sound of one teacup stirring?" focused the mind's chatter and encouraged eventual mental stillness. You unfold the scroll, its rice paper, thin as cicada wings, and a brush of ink still smudges at the edges. The first verse reads, "Sleep is the mirror that envies the dream." The line hovers in your mind like a drifting leaf caught between two currents. You settle onto a tatami mat cross-legged and allow the verse to roll through your thoughts. A fringe tidbit drifts from a monk's gossip. Some practitioners claimed that if you memorized 14 koans and recited them backwards under your pillow, you'd unlock 4 secret dreams, visions of forgotten ancestors, celestial gardens, even your own past lives. Historians still argue whether any lay devotees actually attempted the backwards recital, or if it was simply a bedtime legend spun by playful acolytes. Lantern light flickers against lacquered wooden beams as you whisper the second koan. In a field of snow, which footfall disturbs the whiteness first, the syllables echo in the veranda's hush. You imagine snow, though you've never felt a Kyoto. Winter's frost falling in hushed layers, blanketing thought. You lean forward to paw's chest, rising and falling as though the verse has rewoven your own breath into its riddle. A light joke drifts. If my inbox notifications challenged me like this, I'd actually read them instead of deleting at 3 a.m. The temple bell tolls softly in the distance, and you hear monks shifting paper screens. Across the courtyard, an elder in indigo robes steps into view, his face lined like gnarled cedar. He bows silently and passes you a second scroll. When the moon forgets itself, who becomes the night, you trace his weathered hand as he glides past the scroll's seal, an iron Buddha stamp cold against your palm. It's mainstream knowledge that these nightly koan exchanges were part of the meditation ritual intended to keep novice minds both curious and calm before dawn's zazen session. You roll the second scroll open and recite it under your breath. The words settle like slow rain. You close your eyes and visualize the moon dissolving into blackness, leaving only a halo of starlight. The paradox tug moon without self equals infinite night pulls at your mind until it softens. A second light joke drifts. If my phone lost its brightness, setting this way, I'd never squint at my lock screen again. Leaning back, you notice the veranda's bamboo rail framing a koi pond below. You catch the faintest ripple as a carp glides beneath lily pads, its scaly flank glinting in the lantern shimmer. You recall that some poetic manuals recommended pairing a koan with natural observation, fish, wind, or clouds for a multi-sensory meditation that bypassed sleep's stubborn resistance. Historians still argue whether these combined practices were widespread or confined to temple elites, but right now the koi's silent glide feels like a meditation master, guiding you toward drowsiness. You unroll the third koan. If a whisper falls on mountain stone, does the echo find its source? The riddle loops in your skull as you knead your shoulders, muscles loosening under lantern warmth. A fringe whisper suggests that reciting this particular verse backward could break throat dryness, a common nighttime complaint, by unlocking a tiny chakra beneath the tongue. Scholars still argue whether any such vocal lore survived beyond temple scribes' marginalia or was simply playful footnote. With each paradox, your mind weaves patterns, then gently untangles them. You realize that the koan's magic isn't in solving it, but in feeling your mind slow, like a pond surface calming after a stone's drop. A third light joke flares. If my sleepless nights ended this way, I'd demand paradoxes instead of Ambien. A lantern suddenly flickers, and you glance up to see the head monk approaching his robes, a ripple of dark linen. He kneels beside you and quietly recites his favorite, who listens when the listener falls silent. His voice is low, almost part of the night breeze. You feel your own focus deepen, as though the question has opened a tiny door behind your eyelids. Mainstream practice notes that senior monks often guided novices through classic koans until the mind reached its edge, then slipped them into awarenessless rest. Whether that always worked is another debate. Historians still argue whether koan practice truly produced mental breakthrough or merely exhausted practitioners into sleep. You bow your head as the head monk rises, leaving you alone with the final scroll. It's unmarked, the paper blank, but for a single slash of ink, you hold it forward, uncertain. Then remember that some temples taught the emptiest koan was the most potent, a pure question mark hanging in consciousness. You breathe in the cedar-scented night, letting the question mark expand into a soft hum. Behind you, Lanterns swing, and the veranda's shadows grow fainter against the night sky. You press the empty scroll to your chest, feeling the crisp paper's promise of silence. Your breath slows further, matching the veranda's gentle creak and the pond's muffled ripple below. You rise, folding each scroll carefully, and tuck them into the sash of your kimono. The koi's ripple follows you across the veranda as you step toward the sliding shoji. You pause in the threshold lantern glow behind, and, star-blacked sky ahead, paradox and poetry folded into your bones. You slide the panel closed and the world shifts to muted darkness. Only the faint echo of your breathing remains a living koan. What is the sound of your own mind finally surrendering? You step back ready to drift as the temple's paradoxes cradle you through the hushed hours. You wander at dawn through a mist-draped plum grove just beyond the village edge, where petals drift like pale snow from gnarled branches into the soft grass below. You probably won't survive this without a spontaneous nap among the blossoms. But don't worry, it's a flowery kind of remedy, like resting your head on a pillow made of petals. You spread a woven reed mat beneath a particularly old yew tree, whose moss-covered trunk curves like a sleeping dragon, then lie flat on your back arms at your sides and let the world soften around you. Mainstream accounts note that by the late 19th century, Japanese villagers embraced ume-nemuri plume sleep as a seasonal custom, believing that brief midday rests beneath blooming plum trees could ease overworked minds and soothe restless nights. The shade is gentle, filtered through rosy flowers, and you feel cool dappled light playing across your eyelids, even when they're closed. A breeze stirs petals that settle on your kimono, brushing against your cheeks like fluttering feathers. You inhale the delicate fragrance of plum blossoms, sweet with a hint of tartness, and imagine each inhale drawing away tangled thoughts. A fringe hint lingers in your mind. Some rural elders swore that collecting the first fallen petal for each nap granted dreams sown from poetic omens, visions of secret spring harvests, or long-lost friends calling from another realm. Historians still argue whether such omens of the nap were recorded in any formal diary or simply spun by sleep-addled storytellers hoping to spice up an afternoon doze. Your toes wiggle as the grass shifts beneath them. You feel rooted like a sapling, sinking deep into soil. A light joke drifts through your head. If my couch came with falling petals, I'd nap every Tuesday without shame. You roll your head to the side and notice the sky framed between plum boughs, pale lavender, merging into dawn's peach wash. It's like looking through stained glass, patched by nature itself. Across the grove, a poet in sepia robes reclines under a low branch, his straw hat tipped over his face. He murmurs a half-remembered haiku petals, "Press my lids." Sleep drifts through a garden path toward silent streams. You grin, recognizing the verse from a calligraphy scroll back in the tea house. Mainstream literati praised these ephemeral poems for their ability to focus the drifting, mind-binding imagery of nature to the promise of rest. Yet scholarly debate lingers. Historians still argue whether spontaneous plum haiku were sincere practice or simply genteel excuses for extroverted napping. A pebble crunch sounds as a village child scampers by, eyes wide, behind a cloud of falling petals. He topples to his knees, scooping petals into a bamboo basket, as though gathering stars fallen from the heavens. You sit up, feigning a stretch, and he laughs, offering you a handful of pale blooms. For dreaming, he whispers, voice cheerful as a sparrow's trill. You accept them and press a petal to your temple, feeling its velvety warmth. The contact is oddly reassuring, like a handshake from the grove itself. As you lie back again, you notice tiny insects, plum bud midges, hovering near the blossoms, their wings humming a faint melody you almost feel in your chest. A second light joke surfaces. If my white noise machine sounded this natural, I'd cancel my subscription. You watch the midges swirl, then settle on petals, their tiny bodies a reminder that even small creatures join the grove's naptime chorus. You let your thoughts drift, but they circle back to the pollen dust motes floating in shafts of dawn light. You remember the tea house hostess's comment about pollen dreams. What if the midges carried pollen to your nose, weaving microscopic stories as you slumber? It makes you chuckle, imagining tiny librarians cataloging your REM cycles in grainy yellow dust. Historians still argue whether pollen's hallucinogenic reputation was ever based on actual plant compounds or just poetic exaggeration by itinerant doctors. Your breath lengthens, the tension in your shoulders melts as though the air itself needs it away. You feel a drowsy warmth seeping into your limbs. A third light joke drifts. If my mattress absorbed this much grove calm, I'd never hit the snooze button again. You doze, lulled by the rustle of plum leaves and the steady rhythm of distant bees visiting early blossoms. Moments later, sunbeams widen between branches, warming your face. You wake with a gentle start, eyelids fluttering open to a world of rosy petals drifting downward. You realize you've been out for nearly 20 minutes, precisely the ideal duration recommended in Edo health manuals for a restorative umatoki nap. Mainstream practitioners noted that napping too long beneath sunlit blossoms risked stiff shoulders and groggy heads. 20 minutes was the golden petal mark. As you rise and brush petals from your kimono, you feel lighter than when you lay down like a hori that's lost its weight. You take a deep inhale, tasting the grove's lingering sweetness. You gather the child's basket of petals and scatter them on the mat before you, an offering to the tree for its quiet grace. The child bows and scampers off, leaving you alone with the grove's calm. You stretch your arms above your head, feeling every sinew extend like the plum boughs themselves. You trace a circle in the air, inhaling deeply in, out the breath of petals. The grove feels alive, an ancient caretaker trusting you to join its seasonal rest. You close your eyes briefly, committing the moment to memory. Dappled light, drifting petals mossy, trunk gentle child's laughter. Standing, you brush off stray blossoms and slide a single petal into your sash pocket, a symbolic charm for tomorrow's slumber. You step onto the winding path leading back to the village, each footstep cushioned by fallen petals and soft earth. The grove's hush stays with you, a gentle echo in your bones. You reach the shoji porch of your sleeping quarters and pause, turning back to the grove one last time. Plum blossoms float in the morning light like drifting dreams waiting to bloom. You whisper thanks to the trees, pocketing the hush and petal charm as you step inside to greet the day anew, rested, refreshed, and always ready for another nap under rosy boughs. You ease into your futon chambers, where a low cedar shelf holds neatly stacked pillow manuals, thin booklets of rice paper bound in indigo cloth, their edges mottled with midnight ink. You probably won't survive this without flipping through its diagrams of herbal sachet placements, but don't worry, It's a scholarly kind of comfort, akin to tucking yourself into a scroll of possibilities. You slide the top booklet from the shelf, its cover stamped with a chrysanthemum seal, and settle cross-legged on your straw mat as lantern light pools around you. Mainstream practitioners note that by the Meiji period, small illustrated manuals, makura-e, or pillow images were commonly kept by households to guide the placement of poems, inked diagrams, and tiny satchels of herbs within pillows for sleep aid. You open the first page, revealing a neat diagram of a triangular pillow insert embroidered with camellia and mugwort leaves, flanked by instructions on optimal orientation, the pointed end toward your head's west. According to folk healers, this alignment supposedly channeled the setting sun's calm into dreamlands. You follow the next diagram, a rectangular sleeve sewn into the pillow's side pocket, filled with powdered safflower and crushed peach kernels. A fringed tidbit scuttles in your mind. Some rare editions insist that adding a single chrysanthemum petal to the sleeve summoned visions of autumn moon festivals, a sensory rehearsal that lulled the mind into seasonal harmony. Historians still argue whether any households adopted such elaborate additions, or if these details were later embellishments by eager publishers wanting to sell more manuals. You trace the inked lines with a fingertip, feeling the ridges of charcoal and sumi ink beneath your nail. The artist's strokes are both deliberate and whimsical, a tiny frog perched on the pillow's edge, a brush-thin crane behind the kernels. The blending of practical diagrams and playful sketches reminds you that even in the pursuit of rest, artistry had its place. A light joke bubbles if my sleep app mixed cartoons with instructions. I'd actually read its tips instead of swiping left. Flipping to the next spread, you find elegant calligraphy versus mini koans meant to be read just before sleep dreams unspool when eyelids meet. Yet awake, we chase their fading feet. You murmur it, the lines folding into your awareness like gentle origami. A second light joke drifts: if my shaving cream lather sang this verse, I'd shower twice nightly. Scholars note that such pre-sleep verses serve to focus ruminations, binding both poetic and mnemonic techniques. Though debates continue, historians still argue whether these verses genuinely improved dream recall or simply made pillows seem fancier. On the following page, a fold-out section reveals a pocket pattern for a fabric-bound yum makara, a dream pillow. The diagram shows 3 concentric cloth pouches, linen inner silk, middle cotton, outer each to be filled with successively stronger scents, first sandalwood, then clove, then musk amber. The manual instructs you to press the inner pillow to your cheek for 2 minutes, inhaling straight toward the temple. The effect, they claimed, was a layering of fragrances that would lull the senses like a perfumed lullaby. You lean in, imagining the warmth of sandalwood oils against your skin. You fold the diagram back and exhale. If my neck pillow had this level of scent layering, I'd never travel again without a suitcase full of fragrances. A fringe whisper suggests that some households used incense-coated pillows that smoldered for seconds when you pressed them, releasing a tiny puff of sleep-inducing smoke. Historians still argue whether such incendiary pillows were ever used safely, or if they belonged to alarmist accounts of accidental naptime house fires. Turning a few more pages, you encounter a section on ink-blotted poetry pillows, where guests at inns would dip small scrolls in ink and press them into fresh rice straw pillows, leaving ghost-pressed characters that transferred softly onto travelers' cheeks overnight. The manual includes a checkbox grid of recommended poems and haiku with tiny seal impressions indicating popularity. The plum blossom haiku received 5 chrysanthemum stamps, while the thorny rose couplet earned only 2. You pause feeling tempted to press a snippet into your own pillow. Tonight, imagine waking with poetic smudges across your face. A third light joke surfaces. If my bedsheet came annotated with my grocery list, I'd never forget the milk again. The next pages lay out a sketch of a boy's frolic beneath a peach tree meant to illustrate the ideal dream state, childlike wonder, unburdened by grown-up anxieties. Beneath it, instructions advise sewing a child's faded sock into the pillow's hem as a dream talisman. The text notes mainstream belief that incorporating personal items evoked stronger subconscious connections during sleep. Yet scholarly debate remains. Historians still argue whether personal tokens truly influenced dream content or served purely emotive purposes. You close the manual gently, the cover's cloth soft under your palm. You rest it beside your pillow space and lean back, eyes drifting to the scroll hanging by your headboard, a hand-painted scene of a moonlit stream. The manual's diagrams and the scroll's painted waters merge into a tapestry of visual sleep cues, each image designed to beckon calm and quiet reverie. Your lamp flickers low, throwing dancing shadows on the manual's cover. You rise to slide the lampshade higher, bathing the pages in steadier light. Then, with a deliberate move, you tuck the manual under your futon's edge, ready at hand for tonight's pillow adjustments. You smooth your hair and inhale the faint scent of aged paper and linen, feeling the manual's presence like a silent sleep coach at your side. You slip beneath the futon cover, pulling it up to your chin. Outside, the cicadas have quieted, replaced by a lone cricket's patient song. You press your cheek to the pillow's side pocket, imagining the herbs and verses within pressing back in kind. You let your breath slow, guided by the memory of diagrams and inked haiku. The manual's pages rest there, a bundle of instructions and lore, waiting to be activated by your dreams. As your eyelids drift shut, you picture the frog and crane from its sketches hopping across your closed vision, leading you into the gentle realms of sleep. With one final exhale, you surrender to the pillow, a living book of rest and ritual, weaving you into the soft embrace of night. You ease back into your futon just after midnight, the air cool enough to catch the faint scent of camphor drifting from a small sachet at your pillow's edge. You probably won't survive this without inhaling deeply and draping yourself in a chrysanthemum lavender bundle. But don't worry, it's a fragrant kind of surrender, like tucking your nose into a posy of moonlit blooms. You lift the sachet, its silk pouch crinkling under nimble fingers, and press it lightly against your nose, letting the camphor's menthol spike chase away the edges of wakefulness. Mainstream herbalists of Meiji-era Japan praised camphor and chrysanthemum as sleep aids. Camphor's cooling vapor was believed to clear mental fog, while chrysanthemum's gentle floral sweetness soothed anxious thoughts. You inhale again, imagining the vapor unfurling through your mind like a silver ribbon, fresh, crisp, and oddly reminiscent of peppermint toothpaste. A fringe tidbit whispers that certain tea merchants offered ninja sachets soaked in pine resin and rare mountain peony, claiming the blend could induce dream visions of forest spirits, though historians still argue whether any dreamers ever saw more than their own rambling to-do lists. You lie back, the sachet tucked between your cheek and the pillow's top seam, and listen to the soft susurrus of wind chimes down the hallway. A light joke drifts through. If my laundry detergent smelled this heroic, I'd volunteer for every chore. You inhale the chrysanthemum's honeyed note, a mellow roundness that mellows the camphore's bite into a gentle hum at the back of your throat. Your shoulders unwind as if each scent molecule loosens a coil of tension. Across the room, the moonlight filters through washy screens, painting pale grids on the tatami mats. You recall that common practice, placed sachets at 4 strategic pillow points, north, southeast, and west, mirroring cardinal directions and wind patterns intended to balance qi and usher in restorative rest. Historians still argue whether directional placement truly influenced sleep quality or was simply symbolic feng shui adapted by local healers. But right now, the notion feels comforting, as though aligning your head with sunrise and sunset lanes matters more than a clock's numbers. You shift, clutching the sachet closer, and notice rose-red threads where petals peek through the weave. A second light joke surfaces. If my tea bag had this level of couture, I'd host tea parties for my slipper collection. You breathe, and the combined scent forms a layered chorus: camphor's sharp soprano, chrysanthemum's warm alto, and a whisper of lavender's soprano echo, an herbal trio singing you toward dreams. Your mind wanders to the idea of dream cartography, mapping unconscious landscapes by scent. Some fringe accounts claim that master pillowsmiths infused sachets with rare mandarin zest to enhance dream lucidity for apprentices of medicine, like attuning stethoscopes to the body's somnolent rhythms. Scholars still debate whether those extravagant citrus sachets ever left the courts of elite physicians or were mere marketing hyperbole in apothecary treatises. A gentle creak signals the sliding of the door, and your bath attendant enters with a small wooden box of extra sachets, ginger mint and plum blossom blends. She bows and offers you a choice. You quip, "If only my bedside snack tray looked this gourmet, I'd never raid the fridge at 3 a.m. She smiles, placing a plum blossom sachet on the low table beside your pillow, and retreats without a sound. You tuck the new pouch into the futon edge, lining it beside the first. The combined aroma blooms like a nocturnal garden beneath your nose. You close your eyes and imagine walking a moonlit path lined with peony bushes and pine trees, each breath guiding you deeper into a fragrant labyrinth. The sachets feel like lanterns marking your way through drowsy corridors. Your thoughts begin to blur around the edges as a lullaby-like memory surfaces, the tea house hostess humming under bathhouse steam. The temple veranda's whispered cones, the plum grove's drifting petals, all merge into a tapestry woven from herbal threads and poetic echoes. A third light joke flits. If my noise-canceling headphones played this scent-tuned playlist, I'd never hear neighbors barking again. In the fog of near sleep, you sense the herbs working their subtle alchemy. The camphor clears the mind's itch, the chrysanthemum soothes its ache, and the lavender hums a lullaby on the edges. The sachets cradle your senses as much as the futon cradles your body. You slip past the boundary of wake and dream on a fragrance-fueled tide. A final whisper from the straw mat below a soft thump as the room's lone firefly lantern dims, leaving you in gentle shadow. The sachet's scents linger like faint applause in a silent hall. You drift, you fall, you inhale peace, and finally, you let the herbal lull pull you under the world of scents and shadows, dissolving into the softest of sleeps. You step into the courtyard under a canopy of sliding screens where dozens of small lanterns, each containing a single firefly, hang from bamboo poles, their gentle bioluminescent glow pulsing like distant stars. You probably won't survive this without feeling your pulse slow to match that flicker. But don't worry, it's a living constellation lullaby, softer than any clock's tick. You pause at the lantern line, leaning close to watch a firefly's glow shift from warm amber to pale gold before fading into a soft blink. Mainstream naturalists in 19th century Japan noted that firefly lantern displays Hotaru Akari were arranged at summer inns to soothe guests' nerves, the insect's gentle light, evoking the ancient Hotaruko poems, comparing love's fleeting spark to the bug's ephemeral beauty. You stand beneath a screen painted with a glimmering pattern of fireflies over reeds and whisper light that breathes without fire as a light joke. If my nightlight pulsed with existential poetry, I'd never need blackout curtains again. A fringe tale drifts some Hotaru keepers, trained fireflies, by playing whispered haiku until the insect's flash intervals matched poetic meter, believing that synchrony deepened the viewer's trance. Scholars still argue whether any such insect-orchestrated rhythms truly existed or were inventions of imaginative innkeepers telling bedtime fables. You step forward to trace the lantern's alignment, each hung at varying heights to mimic stars' depth, feeling the courtyard floor cool beneath your bare feet. The lantern line guides you to a low wooden bench where a monk sits cross-legged, his face illuminated by the gentle glow. He holds a paper fan decorated with a firefly motif and murmurs a koan. When you catch a firefly, where does the night go? The question hums in the lantern-lit air. A light breeze stirs the screens as cicadas chorus in the distant pines. You fold the monk's koan into your mind like a stolen petal and sit beside him. A second light joke surfaces. If my email app asked riddles instead of sending pings, I'd actually open it before bed. Behind you, a lantern sways and releases a soft click. Its firefly, freed from the bamboo casing, darts upward to join real insects drifting among the screens. The lantern keeper bows, releasing the next firefly into the night sky. Mainstream accounts confirm that releasing fireflies at the end of displays symbolize gratitude to nature spirits, a ritual echoing Shinto offerings. Yet historians still argue whether the practice harmed firefly populations or honored them sustainably. You rise to release your own lantern's glow, lifting the paper cover gently so the insect can escape. It hovers, then darts into the dark canopy above. You watch it fade until only memory's memory remains. The courtyard's light dims accordingly, each released lantern a step closer to total hush. A final fringe whisper tickles your ear. Some storytellers claim that if you whispered your insomnia fears to a firefly before release, it would carry them away into the sky, though scholars still debate whether any secrets left at Hotaru Akari truly vanished or simply found a new audience among summer stars. You stand alone amid the screen's shadows, breathing in the humid night air, filtered through firefly light and bamboo scent. The courtyard is almost dark now. Flicker by dying flicker, an orchestra of nature's own nightlights. You feel the rhythm settle in your chest, slow and bright, as the insects glow. You pad back through the veranda, guided by the breadcrumbs of last lantern's embers. Each step feels calmer, your own heart's flicker, merging with the courtyard's living galaxy. By the time you slip through the shoji, the world outside is a calm expanse of velvety blackness ready for your mind's final release. You slip into the moonlit courtyard by torchlight's afterglow, the scent of cool stone and polished steel mingling beneath a midnight sky. You probably won't survive this without learning the slow, deliberate dance of a lone samurai's midnight kata. But don't worry, it's a blade-brushed path to calm, like slicing through your racing thoughts. In your hand, you grasp the familiar curve of a wooden bokken, its surface worn smooth by decades of practice. Mainstream records show that 19th century samurai often practiced iaijutsu at night to hone both focus and discipline, believing that the still darkness sharpened the mind's edge as keenly as steel. You step forward onto a square of flagstones, hand steady on the hilt, and begin the first motion, slow draw poised cut sheath, return all in one seamless flow. The wooden sword arcs before you, slicing through the cool air with a whispering rush that echoes in the silent courtyard. A fringe tidbit drifts some dojo legends claim that practicing under a waning moon imbued each stroke with secret lunar energy, helping samurai channel subconscious fears into disciplined form, though historians still argue whether any such moon-charged techniques ever passed beyond folklore or truly enhanced martial prowess. You flow into the second kata, the falling pedal strike, lowering the bokken to hip as your footsteps glide like drifting cherry blossoms. Your breath matches each step. Inhale as you pivot, exhale as you cut, until the world melts away into the slow cadence of blade and breath. A light joke flickers: if my morning coffee ceremony involved this much ceremony, I'd never skip espresso again. Moonlight glints off the bokken's polished grain as you transition to the quiet stream thrust, stepping forward in perfect balance. Historians note that many samurai attributed midday restlessness to overtraining in daylight. Practicing at night was a mainstream remedy to reframe intensity into a meditative ritual. You feel each tap of the wooden sword on stone solid reassuring as drafts slip under sliding doors and whisper across roof tiles. In the distance, a lone rooster's cry registers as a distant rhythm. You pause bokken raised and listen, then fold the sword into a ready stance, imagining slicing through that single call like it were a stubborn echo in your mind. A second light joke surfaces: if only my alarm clock could be vanquished by a wooden sword, I'd never hit snooze again. You move into the lotus blossom guard, lowering into a gentle stance as though cradling an invisible flower between blade and sky. Your knees bend, hips settle, and the courtyard's crickets murmur approval. A fringe whisper suggests some masters taught that mimicking lotus opening at dawn symbolically aligned the practitioner with renewal, though scholars still argue whether such floral-inspired stances were codified in any formal scrolls or emerged as poetic embellishments later. Your movements become fluid, a silent dialogue of posture and intent. You release tension from your shoulders, and the bokken's weight becomes an extension of your own arm, no longer wood, but part of your being. Another light joke flits: if my smartphone felt this intuitive, I'd never drop a call again. Between forms, you rest in mindful pause, standing straight as a bamboo stalk bokken grounded before you. You close your eyes and feel the sword's grain against your palm. The courtyard's dark roof beams frame your silhouette against the pale sky. For a moment, you and the sword are still a single breath, one consciousness. You open your eyes and slip into the river's flow, cut a sweeping horizontal strike that mimics water's steady passage. Each swing ends with the bokken nestled at your hip blade, parallel to earth. You hear the soft click of tsuba against your kimono's hem, a crisp punctuation marking perfect form. Mainstream training treatises emphasize that such repetitive motion fosters muscle memory, quieting mental noise until only the body's logic remains. A fringe rumor drifts some students claimed masters whispered koan-like questions at each swing who moves the mind when the sword is still forcing warrior and weapon into a shared riddle of action and stillness. Historians still argue whether such whispered prompts were part of genuine martial pedagogy or later romanticized anecdotes. You flow into your final sequence, the midnight chrysanthemum bloom, a rising cut followed by a deep bow to the sword's tip, honoring both blade and knight. You press the bokken's end to the stone, then step back and sheath it in one silent motion. The courtyard is hushed, save for your steady heartbeat and a distant owl's call. You kneel for a moment, head bowed, letting the silence fill your chest. The wooden weapon rests at your side, wood grain echoing the midnight's grainy hush. You inhale deeply and exhale, releasing every fragment of unrest as though expelling dust from your spirit. Rising, you pad across the flagstones to where your linen robe hangs on a wooden peg. You slip it on the fabric, brushing like a quiet vow. The courtyard's lanterns glow weakly now, their light waning like your own alertness. You step back through the veranda's sliding door, the cold air of your chamber wrapping around you like a cool cloak. The bokken rests in its stand, a silent sentinel beside your futon. You let your feet sink into the tatami, each step a continuation of the kata's lesson balance, focus release. As you slide into the futon, you feel the samurai's disciplined flow still humming through your limbs. Your mind, once restless as a startled bird, is now a calm pond reflecting moonlight. A final light joke flickers: if my bed routine involved samurai meditation, I'd never worry about insomnia at all. You close your eyes and imagine each kata's shape petal strikes stream thrust lotus guard, folding into the night's embrace. The wooden sword's memory dissolves into soft muscle recall, and you drift carried by the midnight steel's peace. You step onto the dew-kissed veranda just before dawn, the horizon a pale wash of lavender and gold, and lift your gaze skyward to the first scattered stars of morning. You probably won't survive this without tracing constellations with verse and finger, but don't worry, it's a poetic kind of astronomy, like counting sheep stitched into the heavens. In your hand rests a small notebook of haiku, prompts each line pairing star clusters with brief syllabic meditations designed to slow runaway thoughts. Mainstream stargazers of 19th century Japan turned to haiku as a mnemonic for mapping constellations. The Pleiades became seven sisters, resting on silken clouds, Orion, a lone hunter, spearing dawn's first light, and Cassiopeia, an ancient throne tipped by crescent moon. You tuck the notebook under your arm and point to the first haiku prompt, count the sisters one by one. Where does midnight find its home? You murmur the lines, feeling their rhythm align your heartbeat with the sky's gentle pulse. A fringe note drifts some enthusiasts claimed that composing personalized haiku for each constellation unlocked astral dreams, filling sleep with vivid night sky visions. Though historians still argue whether any such dream maps were ever systematically recorded or remained playful, travelers' tales shared over sock. You take a slow breath and count the Pleiades 1, 2, 3 until you lose count amid their clustered brilliance. Each twinkling point feels like a syllable in a cosmic poem. A light joke surfaces if my to-do list was this sparkly, I'd never forget a single chore. You copy the prompt's wording onto a blank page, then glance skyward and improvise your own final line. Scribed in stardust, hush unfolds. Moving slowly along the veranda railing, you spot Orion's belt rising in the east. You recite the next haiku, 3 gems, on velvet sash. How far does longing stretch? The syllables taste cool on your tongue, echoing the crisp pre-dawn air. You trace the 3 stars with your finger drawing an invisible line. The act feels like tuning a musical instrument, calibrating mind to cosmos. Between recitations, a soft cricket symphony weaves through bamboo slats. You pause to close your eyes, letting the insect chorus accompany your haiku cadence. A second light joke drifts if my meditation app rewarded syllables with cricket praise, I'd never skip a session. You open your eyes to see a single firefly dart by its glow, a punctuation mark in the sky's stanza. Turning your attention to Cassiopeia's W shape, you consider the prompt throne, tipped by lunar grin, who sits within the night. You murmur it, feeling the question settle in your chest. You copy it onto your page, then jot a personal response in tiny characters at the bottom. Who am I when darkness guides? The notebook feels warm, as though absorbing moonlight itself. Mainstream educators often encouraged students to pair haiku with star charts, believing the blend of art and astronomy sharpened both observation and imagination. Yet fringe critics scoffed that poetic flights distracted from empirical accuracy. Historians still argue whether haiku mapping ever advanced actual celestial science or merely enriched cultural lore. You shift your feet to follow the curve of the Milky Way, its cloudy river fanning from horizon to zenith. You recite the next haiku prompt, cosmic river flowing slow. What burdens does it know? The words drift into the dawn breeze. You close your eyes and visualize your worries scattering upstream, carried away on star-water currents. Suddenly, the first sliver of sunrise peeks over distant hills, igniting the eastern sky in rose and apricot. You pause, notebook open, and watch as dawn chases stars into daylight. A light joke surfaces. If my alarm blared in pastel hues, I'd wake up with a painter's palette. You jot a final haiku for the fading stars. Last ember of the night, who carries morning's flame. The cricket chorus falls silent. Only a distant cuckoo heralds the new day. You close your notebook and bow to the sky, a humble haiku homage to night's gentle expanse. You step back into your chamber, the dawn's glow painting the tatami in soft gold. Your mind feels both expansive and grounded, like the sky folded into a single thought. Sliding the shoji closed, you carry the notebook to your bedside shelf, its pages now etched with cosmic verse. The memory of star-counting haiku lingers in your chest, a quiet pulse guiding you toward restful awareness. Outside, morning routines stir the kettle's first hiss footsteps on wooden floors, but you remain wrapped in the dawn's poetic hush. You slip beneath the futon, breathing in the subtle scent of linen and old ink. In your mind, constellations still shimmer, their haiku prompts echoing in gentle loops. You press your hand over your heart, feeling its steady beat, join the universe's timeless song. As your eyelids flutter closed, you whisper the final line you crafted. Night's echoes fold into new day and let that cadence cradle you. The stars may vanish in sunlight, but their haiku melodies reside within guiding dreams until dusk's return. You step onto the dew-kissed veranda just before dawn, the horizon a pale wash of lavender and gold, and lift your gaze skyward to the first scattered stars of morning. You probably won't survive this without tracing constellations with verse and finger, but don't worry, it's a poetic kind of astronomy, like counting sheep stitched into the heavens. In your hand rests a small notebook of haiku, prompts each line pairing star clusters with brief syllabic meditations designed to slow runaway thoughts. Mainstream stargazers of 19th century Japan turned to haiku as a mnemonic. For mapping constellations, the Pleiades became seven sisters resting on silken clouds, Orion, a lone hunter spearing dawn's first light, and Cassiopeia, an ancient throne tipped by crescent moon. You tuck the notebook under your arm and point to the first haiku prompt, count the sisters one by one. Where does midnight find its home? You murmur the lines, feeling their rhythm align your heartbeat with the sky's gentle pulse. A fringe note drifts. Some enthusiasts claimed that composing personalized haiku for each constellation unlocked astral dreams, filling sleep with vivid night sky visions. Though historians still argue whether any such dream maps were ever systematically recorded or remained playful travelers' tales shared over sake. You take a slow breath and count the Pleiades 1, 2, 3 until you lose count amid their clustered brilliance. Each twinkling point feels like a syllable in a cosmic poem. A light joke surfaces. If my to-do list was this sparkly, I'd never forget a single chore. You copy the prompt's wording onto a blank page, then glance skyward and improvise your own final line. Scribed in stardust, hush unfolds. Moving slowly along the veranda railing, you spot Orion's belt rising in the east. You recite the next haiku 3 gems on velvet sash. How far does longing stretch? The syllables taste cool on your tongue, echoing the crisp pre-dawn air. You trace the 3 stars with your finger, drawing an invisible line. The act feels like tuning a musical instrument, calibrating mind to cosmos. Between recitations, a soft cricket symphony weaves through bamboo slats. You pause to close your eyes, letting the insect chorus accompany your haiku cadence. A second light joke drifts. If my meditation app rewarded syllables with cricket praise, I'd never skip a session. You open your eyes to see a single firefly dart by its glow, a punctuation mark in the sky's stanza. Turning your attention to Cassiopeia's W shape, you consider the prompt throne, tipped by lunar grin, who sits within the night. You murmur it, feeling the question settle in your chest. You copy it onto your page, then jot a personal response in tiny characters at the bottom. Who am I when darkness guides? The notebook feels warm, as though absorbing moonlight itself. Mainstream educators often encourage students to pair haiku with star charts, believing the blend of art and astronomy sharpened both observation and imagination. Yet fringe critics scoff that poetic flights distracted from empirical accuracy. Historians still argue whether haiku mapping ever advanced actual celestial science or merely enriched cultural lore. You shift your feet to follow the curve of the Milky Way, its cloudy river fanning from horizon to zenith. You recite the next haiku prompt, cosmic river flowing slow. What burdens does it know? The words drift into the dawn breeze. You close your eyes and visualize your worries scattering upstream, carried away on starwater currents. Suddenly, the first sliver of sunrise peeks over distant hills, igniting the eastern sky in rose and apricot. You pause, notebook open, and watch as dawn chases stars into daylight. A light joke surfaces. If my alarm blared in pastel hues, I'd wake up with a painter's palette. You jot a final haiku for the fading stars, last ember of the night, who carries morning's flame. The cricket chorus falls silent. Only a distant cuckoo heralds the new day. You close your notebook and bow to the sky, a humble haiku homage to night's gentle expanse. You step back into your chamber, the dawn's glow painting the tatami in soft gold. Your mind feels both expansive and grounded, like the sky folded into a single thought. Sliding the shoji closed, you carry the notebook to your bedside shelf, its pages now etched with cosmic verse. The memory of star-counting haiku lingers in your chest, a quiet pulse guiding you toward restful awareness. Outside, morning routines stir the kettle's first hiss footsteps on wooden floors, but you remain wrapped in the dawn's poetic hush. You slip beneath the futon, breathing in the subtle scent of linen and old ink. In your mind, constellations still shimmer, their haiku prompts echoing in gentle loops. You press your hand over your heart, feeling its steady beat, join the universe's timeless song. You rise before moonset to gather beneath the plum grove once more, where a small iron cauldron sits over smoldering coals, steaming with bittersweet willow bark tea. You probably won't survive this without grimacing at its deep tannic tang, but don't worry, it's the kind of medieval pharmacy that tastes like chomping on your garden fence posts, only with a promise of dreamy calm. You lift a chipped wooden ladle and pour a cup of the dark brew into your waiting porcelain bowl. Mainstream botanists of Meiji-era Japan documented that willow bark imported through Nagasaki's open ports contained salicin, a natural precursor to modern aspirin, used in folk medicine to ease pain and induce sleep by lowering feverish agitation. You raise the bowl to your lips, the steam curling into your nostrils like lazy serpents carrying wood smoke and a bracing green note that makes your eyes water. The first sip is a shock to the palate, like biting into fresh elm, but the warmth unfurls through your chest, loosening tense shadows in your mind. A fringe tidbit floats in on that smoke. Certain herbalists claim that adding a pinch of powdered dragon's beard moss, actually a rare lichen found on ancient camphor trees, could amplify willow's soporific effects, yielding visions of cloud-bound dragons carrying you into dream realms. Historians still argue whether that moss truly held any pharmacological power or was merely an exotic embellishment to raise the price of sleepy-time remedies. You settle on a reed mat beside the cauldron cup, cradled in both hands. The bark bits bob like miniature boats in the dark liquid. A light joke drifts through your head. If my morning coffee grounds looked this chunky, I'd file a complaint with the cafe. But you force another sip, bracing against the bitter wash that slides down your throat and warms your limbs. Next to you, a traveling physician in sepia-striped robes stirs the cauldron with an oak branch, humming under his breath. He counts the steeps, exactly 3 turns, that's mainstream prescription. Too little bark yields toothsome bitterness with no relief. Too much sparks headaches. You watch him nod at his own reflection on the bruise rippling surface, then dip a porcelain spoon into the mixture to fish out stray bits of bark. A second light joke winks. If my dentist brewed this stuff, I'd never skip our appointments again. Between sips, you notice a small glass vial on the mat labeled white clover essence. The physician uncorks it, and a sweet floral scent wafts out. He adds 2 drops to your bowl, stirring gently. He explains that white clover's subtle sweetness masked willow's edge and added mild muscle relaxation, a mainstream pairing for restless limbs. Yet fringe lore insists that some herb collectors spilled rare moonflower dew into their tonic, harvested on the eve of the summer solstice, claiming it granted one night free of any dreams at all, which scholars still argue whether was Insomnia's cure or simply a dreamless void. You sip again the clover's honeyed undercurrent, making the bark's grip more palatable. You feel a gentle heaviness settling behind your eyes, as though gravity has increased just enough to weigh you into the mat. A third light joke floats up. If my eyelids got this heavy whenever my Wi-Fi dropped, I'd never mind losing connection again. The physician slides another container over a porcelain jar of roasted kochia seeds. He sprinkles a pinch into your tea. He tells you that kochia's nutty aroma and mild sedative properties were mainstream folk remedies along the Silk Road reaching Japan via Chinese merchants in the early 19th century. Yet fringe whispers caution that too many seeds led to vivid nightmares of dancing skeletons, though historians still argue whether any patient actually reported any more than indigestion and regret. You close your eyes for a moment and inhale. The air tastes like a woodland floor after rain, musty, crisp, alive with decay and promise. You feel your shoulders exhale. You almost drift eyes, fluttering before catching the physician's eye. He points toward a distant lantern glow at the grove's edge. You rise methodically, setting your bowl on the mat, and follow him through gnarled trunks toward a low stone altar. There, a group of villagers kneel, each clutching its own mug of willow bark tea. The physician nods to the eldest woman, who raises her bowl to the sky in a silent toast. You mimic the gesture, tea sloshing at the rim. The woman murmurs a blessing. May your aches settle like drifting leaves, and sips, closing her eyes. Mainstream medical scholars note that communal tonic rituals reinforced social bonds and prepared bodies collectively for rest cycles. Yet fringe proponents claim that group drinking aligned villagers' biorhythms, creating synchronized sleep waves, though historians still debate whether any collective slumber patterns ever emerged or simply served to foster camaraderie. You return to your mat, your cup now half empty and heart unburdened. The grove is hushed except for cicadas' distant chorus and the physician's soft hum. One final sip sends the tonic's final warmth to your stomach's center, anchoring you. You set the bowl aside and let the night breeze cool your face, the grove's scent of bark and clover lingering in your lungs. You lie back on the reed mat, stretching arms overhead, fingers brushing fallen petals. You feel both grounded and light ache dissolved, thoughts drifted. You close your eyes, imagining a wooden path winding through camphor forests, each step guided by the brew's gentle hand. You feel a tug, a lullaby in tannins and sap that draws you down. A stray leaf flutters to your chest, and you trace its vein pattern in your mind, then let it go. You are floating between wakes and dreams, carried by the willow's whisper. You drift, you fall, and the grove cradles you with its herbal hymn. You wake to the quiet pop of a pine cone falling somewhere overhead, but only briefly, your body still humming from the willow bark's slow burn through your bloodstream. Stretching stiff limbs beneath a linen coverlet, you blink into early light, filtering through papered walls. The physician is gone, but a folded note remains beside your mat, written in crooked brushstrokes. When the body sleeps, but the thoughts rise, burn the poem. So now you find yourself kneeling at a tiny brazier, holding a square of washi paper between your fingers. On it is a short cryptic poem written in ornate Edo calligraphy. You read it once, then again. It says, "Between eyelid and moonlight, a crane folds into smoke. The breath does not ask why." You frown, then smile, because of course you have no idea what it means, and that's precisely the point. These strange poetic riddles were called Nemuri Uta, or sleep poems, and they were once common in 19th century Japanese sleep rituals, especially for those plagued by stubborn insomnia. Their goal to short-circuit rumination by replacing your spinning thoughts with a paradox that can't be solved. It's like unplugging the blender by baffling it. Mainstream accounts from Edo period medical journals note that monks often composed these sleep poems to accompany meditation before bed. They weren't meant to be understood. They were meant to be carried into the mind like a question with no answer lodging between logic and surrender. A light joke floats up. It's like reading a philosophy major's dream journal. You're confused, but too sleepy to protest. You strike a match, and the paper curls into flame in the brazier's cradle. The ash swirls like snow before vanishing. And just like that, the thought is gone. You're left blinking at the brazier's faint smoke trail, your chest rising in unhurried rhythm. A fringe tidbit some monks believed burning these koan-like poems opened a passage for dreams to escape the waking body, a ritual that let you sleep while your mind wandered free. Others took it more literally and claimed that by destroying a worry in poetic form, you cleared it from the soul's ledger. Historians still argue whether these symbolic rituals had any measurable neurological benefit, or if they simply gave anxious minds something poetic to latch onto. You shuffle to the garden's edge and spot 3 more folded poems pinned to a bamboo screen. You pluck the next one. The ink forgets the hand, but still it writes. No context, no instructions, just an invitation to let go. You burn this one too, watching the smoke rise like sleep from the center of your chest. In the next room, you find a stone basin filled with warm water and floating camellia blossoms. You splash your face, inhaling the subtle floral notes, a mainstream bathhouse trick believed to calm the nervous system. A monk once told a sleepless samurai that the trick was to wash your face as if removing a mask, not dirt, just performance. A light joke tiptoes in. If you could rinse off anxiety like grime your shower drain would clog by Tuesday. A final poem lies beside the basin. It reads, "Spin the silence, let it ring." You chuckle under your breath. What does that even mean? But your mind slows. It doesn't need to know. The spinning stops. Later that day, you visit a hillside temple known for its sleep sutra ritual, a peculiar blend of Buddhist chanting, herbal fumigation, and yes, more riddling poems. You're offered a cushion beside an incense burner shaped like a turtle. The monk chants slowly syllables, unrolling like sleepy waves. As the smoke rises, a new poem is handed to you. If the bell rings, but no ear listens, was it really awake? You smile. That one feels like a trap. You burn it anyway. Mainstream Japanese practitioners in the late 1800s considered insomnia less a medical issue and more a misalignment of rhythm. Sleep was not achieved, it was allowed. It came when the mind became compatible with night. Fringe theorists took it a step further, suggesting that certain people were simply born out of season, naturally misaligned with the planetary clock. Whether insomnia stemmed from diet karmic imbalance or lunar tides, historians still argue over the cause, though most agree on one thing. Those poems got people to stop chasing answers. You walk a path flanked by lanterns shaped like foxes, each holding a tiny scroll between their jaws. You pluck one, and it reads, "The dream arrives after you stop waiting." No fire this time. You fold it gently and slip it into your robe's inner pocket. It belongs to you now. The sun sinks behind the temple roofs. You wander back through the pine grove where the willow bark tea once simmered. The coals are cold. The mat is gone, but your thoughts are soothed. You know now that not every problem needs solving, not every night needs conquering. Sometimes sleep is the reward for surrender. A breeze lifts a trail of ash and fallen petals down the hill, and you follow, not with urgency, but with ease. Your footsteps soft, your breath calm, and in the distance a bell rings. Or maybe it doesn't. It's twilight when you reach the foot of the hill, your sandals pressing gently into the earth. The last bird stitching lazy sounds into the falling dusk. The scent of cedar and old ink still clings faintly to your sleeves. You move like someone who has nothing urgent left to remember. Ahead, a single lantern swings outside a modest inn. You duck beneath its faded curtain. Inside, everything smells of roasted barley and plum vinegar. A young woman greets you with a bow, then gestures to a stack of woven scrolls by the hearth. "Choose one," she whispers, "but choose slow." You crouch fingers, brushing the ridged paper spines. The innkeeper adds almost like a joke, "They put even the most dramatic samurai to sleep." You raise an eyebrow. These are Nomuri Zoshi's sleep scrolls, short fictional stories handwritten in oversized brushstrokes, meant to be read in flickering lamplight until the reader's eyes naturally closed. They were a 19th century predecessor to modern bedtime podcasts, though back then the stories were oddly paced and pleasantly pointless. A girl chasing a kite across rooftops, a carp who falls in love with a potter's apprentice, a hat that makes you sneeze prophetic riddles. Mainstream records note that sleep scrolls became popular among both rural farmers and traveling merchants. Their popularity wasn't due to plot, but to intention. These weren't thrilling tales to keep you hooked. They were meant to let your focus wander, then unravel. You unroll a scroll and begin reading aloud, your voice echoing against the wood-paneled walls. The dog barked, but the wind had no interest. A gourd rolled down the path. The monk didn't stop it. What follows is a gentle cascade of vignettes. No rising action, no climax, just presence. It's absurdly soothing, like listening to your own dream narrated in slow motion. Here comes the fringe tidbit. One unusual school of thought among Edo period insomniacs believed that the act of reading aloud to oneself, especially nonsense or surreal prose, was a form of mental exorcism. It wasn't about the words. It was about hearing your own voice in a non-anxious cadence. You weren't talking to yourself out of madness, but into silence. You pause halfway through a page about a frog that builds a ladder to nowhere. It doesn't matter where it leads. The scroll's warmth sits in your lap like a sleepy cat. Historians still argue whether the practice of sleep scroll reading originated in monastic Zen settings or among the urban merchant class. Some say the scrolls were derivative of older oral folk tales. Others suggest they emerged precisely because more and more people in cities were lying awake exhausted but overstimulated, much like you are after a doom-scrolling session on your phone. Funny how little changes. The innkeeper returns with a cup of thick, honeyed millet tea. She gestures to your scroll and smiles. That one ends with a boat that dreams of being a shoe. You blink. Of course it does. There's something liberating about stories that don't lead anywhere, like walking a garden path in the dark. You can't predict it. You can only follow it breath by breath, line by line. A soft joke nudges in. It's like your uncle's vacation stories, pointless, meandering, but eventually sleep-inducing. You lean back, letting your head rest against the wall. The scroll drapes across your knees, unread and unreadable now. The room feels slower. You've stopped checking the time. Behind the inn, you find a tiny courtyard with a round koi pond. One koi circles with the lazy confidence of a creature who's never rushed. You sit. You listen. And just when you think your mind might race again, you hear a voice behind you. An old guest, maybe, or another traveler. He says, I once read a scroll that ended halfway through a sentence. The last line was just, and so, with a turn of the moon, he finally... And that was it. You chuckle. That's brilliant. Maybe he dreamed the ending. Maybe that was the ending. Back in your room, the lamp gutters, once then steadies. You lie down beside the unfinished scroll. Its last line reads, the blanket was jealous of the moonlight, but forgave it in the end. Somehow you understand exactly what it means. You close your eyes, and this time there's no resistance. The story continues somewhere behind your lids. A frog, a shoe, a boat, a jealous blanket, all meandering across your thoughts, like soft parade floats drifting across a nighttime lake. Your dreams break like a tide quietly, without ceremony, and the next thing you know, you're blinking awake to the sight of soft light pooling beneath rice paper windows. Morning, no, just the gray interlude before it. You stretch beneath the weight of a cotton futon, but your mind is already elsewhere, on a name someone mentioned last night. A healer monk called Daisetsu of the Falling Leaf Temple. Locals say he could cure any insomnia without ever speaking a word. You pull your coat tighter, step into sandals still warm from the hearth, and set out again. The temple lies high in the foothills at the end of a pilgrimage trail lined with prayer wheels and forgetful dogs. By the time you arrive, the sky is the color of powdered pearl. The temple gates are open, and you pass beneath them like breath through a wind chime. Daisetsu sits on a wooden porch trimming the brown edges off a pile of dried lotus leaves. He looks up and smiles, not like someone welcoming a guest, but like someone recognizing an echo. He gestures to the spot beside him. You sit. Here's a mainstream fact. The practice of silent healing presence, or Mokudo Ryoho, was an actual fringe medical tradition documented in late 19th century Japan. Certain monks and mountain ascetics were believed to possess sleeping auras their mere nearness could induce peace. They never chanted. They barely breathed louder than the wind. Fringe anecdote. Some texts describe Daisetsu as a man who once slept for 9 consecutive days on purpose as an act of protest against a feudal lord who taxed pillows. You try not to laugh. He might hear. Daisetsu stands and beckons you toward a low pavilion. Inside is a flat bamboo mat, a small inkstone, and a single sheet of handmade paper already centered on a lacquered table. He nods for you to sit. Then, very gently, he places a brush in your hand. Apparently, this is the next step, writing your sleeplessness away. No mantras, no scrolls, just the act of brushwork. At first you hesitate. What are you supposed to write? Your brain floods with to-do lists, random song lyrics, that thing you said weirdly in 2008. But eventually the ink settles your hand into rhythm. Your first line is, "I'm tired of being tired." Then, "My eyelids whisper, but don't close." And finally, "The dreams are waiting. Why am I not?" You pause. The brush tip trembles, then stops. Daisetsu reads your lines, nods once, and lights a small piece of sandalwood. The scent curls up like a thought you almost remember. He folds your paper and presses it into a small iron kettle where it catches flame. Your sleepless words become smoke. You don't need to understand it for it to work. Historians still debate whether Mokudo Ryoho was truly widespread or limited to a handful of spiritually inclined villages in the Kii Peninsula. Some argue it was mostly placebo, just a poetic way of slowing down in a culture allergic to haste. Others suggest it was more an acknowledgement that language itself could hold tension, and shedding it, by not using it or burning it, was the first step to release. You watch the last tendril of smoke spiral into the rafters. Outside, the world feels softer. You realize that you haven't checked the sun's position or your own reflection or anything that needs fixing. There's a strange pleasure in not knowing the time. You could stay here forever, or at least until the next exhale. Daisetsu presses a dried leaf into your palm, a lotus curled like a sleeping cat. No words, just a gift. Just this. You descend the hill slowly, like someone who's finished something important, though you can't quite name what. The day continues, as it always does, but you're not in a hurry to catch up to it. A joke tickles at the back of your throat. You came looking for insomnia cures, and instead found a man who makes you write poetry, burn it, and leave with a dead flower. And somehow it works. You tuck the leaf into your pocket. It rustles gently with your steps. That night, back in town, you don't reach for anything. No scrolls, no potions, no perfect thoughts. You simply lie down and let the dark arrive. And somewhere at the temple, Daisetsu sleeps too. You wake with the distinct feeling that you didn't dream, and somehow that's a win. Your limbs feel like overcooked noodles. Your brain, boiled rice. You stretch, groan softly, and blink at the ceiling of your little inn-room. You slept, really slept. But, of course, you can't leave things there. You want to understand why it worked. Not the brush or the monk or even the burning of words, but why you suddenly let go. So you head east. You've heard about a certain community near Lake Biwa, families descended from old imperial couriers known for their nightly rituals involving koan poems and tea leaves. Not tea drinking, just tea watching. The town is quiet. Rows of sliding doors, each one cracked open like a toothy grin. It smells like pickled plums and dried tatami. An old woman directs you to a wooden house painted black with pine soot. There you meet Kaito. Kaito is maybe 70, maybe 200. His robe smells faintly of ink. He smiles like he knows your favorite flavor of regret. Sleep is a visitor, he says. You don't chase a visitor, you prepare the room. He gestures to a wide, low table. On it sit 7 folded slips of paper, each no larger than a plum blossom, and a shallow bowl filled with loose tea leaves. Beside the bowl is a candle lit, but barely. Choose one, he says. You pick a paper, unfold it. On the inside is a line of brush-painted verse. Even the moon forgets to shine some nights. You blink. It's not a riddle. It's not advice. It's an observation. And somehow that makes it gentler. Here's your mainstream historical fact. By the mid-1800s, Zen Buddhist temples across Japan often used nightly koan recitation as a form of cognitive unhooking, essentially mental reset buttons. The idea was to replace looping thoughts with something that couldn't be solved, something that broke logic like a snowflake in a fire. Fringe tidbit. Some monasteries insisted that tea leaves possessed memory spores, residues of the dreams of everyone who'd brewed that batch. It was common practice to let tea steep untouched, allowing its silent memory to pervade the room. Drinking it was optional. Kaito places the bowl between you and the candle. Watch the steam, he says. It knows the way out. You try, you really do. But your mind, like a poorly trained monkey, keeps grabbing things, chores words, the koan, the smell of sandalwood, the shape of Daisetsu's temple. Kaito says nothing, just watches you watch. The tea doesn't move much, neither does the candle. But somehow the space between them breathes. Eventually you settle. That's when he speaks again. There is a poem, he says, passed down only to those who never ask for it. You raise an eyebrow. He grins. Lucky for you, you just sat here like a rock. He leans forward and whispers, even when the fire dies, the ash keeps dreaming. No analysis, no interpretation, just that. Historians still argue whether such koan-based rituals were purely psychological tools or encoded spiritual metaphors. Some modern scholars think they were early forms of autosuggestion therapy, a kind of poetic hypnosis. Others argue they were simply art for art's sake, with the bonus effect of calming the mind. You're not sure, but you do know this when you leave Kaito's house. The world looks oddly crisper, not louder, just more defined, as if the act of not understanding something had cleaned your senses. You wander the edges of Lake Biwa. A fisherman waves to you, a heron stares with contempt. You spot a small wooden boat, half sunk in reeds, and, for a second, your brain almost turns that into a metaphor. But then you don't. You just keep walking. That night, Kaito insists you stay. The guest room is spare, one scroll on the wall, one folded blanket, one piece of paper beneath the pillow. Before sleep you peek. The paper reads, "Some silences are borrowed, some are owned." You don't know what it means, And for once, that feels perfect. You sleep like a stone in deep water. You don't even realize it's morning until the smell of miso and charcoal touches your nose like a memory. Outside the paper wall, someone hums off key and unhurried. It's Kaido, making breakfast. You stretch, not quite wanting to return to the world yet. But the world comes as it always does, with questions and wind and the sound of old slippers on wooden floors. You eat beside the window. Cato doesn't ask how you slept. He doesn't have to. You've seen enough, he says after a long silence, pouring more tea that neither of you touch. But there is one more place, the cracked garden. You'll find it by following the ants. You think he's joking. He isn't. You follow a line of ants, actual ants, across stone paths, through hedges, around a gnarled tree shaped like a fist. And there it is. Not a real garden, more like an open courtyard, boxed in by bamboo slats and old paintbrushes hung from strings. The ground is cracked, earth-dry, splintered fractal. Someone has filled each crack with gold leaf. It sparkles in the late morning sun. In the center, a wooden stand with a single laminated card. It reads, "This garden was once used by court scribes and failed poets to forget the weight of unfinished verses. They would lie here, eyes open, until their thoughts dissolved into shapes." You lie down. Nothing happens at first, then something very small, your heartbeat slows. And you remember every poem, every cryptic line, every whispered not quite truth that led you here. Here's your historical fact. In the Edo period, Japanese poet monks often trained in gardens specifically designed to interrupt pattern recognition. These disruption spaces used broken lines, asymmetry, and cracked stones to disarm the brain's urge to make sense, often lulling the viewer into a trance. Fringe tidbit. One such monk, known only as Sokudo, reportedly developed a ritual involving staring at a beetle's shell for hours to train the mind to stop naming things. He claimed that when you truly see without naming the world sings differently. You stare at the cracks, the gold flickers, the ants meander past your ear. You resist the urge to call them ants. And now finally it happens. You feel like you have cracked. Not broken, just opened. The world pours in, not in loudness or clarity, but in permission. Permission to not know. Permission to not fix. Permission to sleep. Historians still argue whether any of this was effective or just elaborate cultural placebo. Some say these practices laid the groundwork for Japanese psychosomatic medicine. Others dismiss them as spiritual performance art. But lying in the cracked garden, you stop caring who's right. Your body softens. The sky blurs. You think of the monk with the beetle, and you wonder, did he ever give that beetle a name? You almost ask aloud, but then you don't. And now, your breath lengthens, your pulse quiets. You feel untangled, not healed, not enlightened, just present. The wind shifts. You don't need to stay. You return to Kaido. He doesn't ask what you saw. He hands you a blank sheet of paper and a brush and simply says, "Tonight you write your own." You smile. You nod. You don't write anything. That night, you fall asleep with the blank paper under your cheek. And for the first time in weeks, maybe years, you dream of nothing. Nothing at all. Let's stay here a while longer. Let your breathing fall into rhythm with the imagined rustle of bamboo leaves, the quiet drip of an unseen ladle, the golden cracks in dry earth, catching just a flicker of moonlight. There's no quiz on what you learned tonight. No need to decode every poem or trace the exact route from Kyoto to Biwa, or prove that a beetle's shell holds the key to insomnia. The point isn't proof, it's pause. Even now, as your thoughts begin to float like dandelion seeds in a slow summer breeze, notice how gentle your own mind becomes when it stops trying to fix itself, when it trades certainty for silence. Tonight, you're not a problem to be solved. You're just someone who wandered through incense smoke, touched old stone, and watched ants without naming them. Let that be enough. Let your eyes soften behind closed lids. Let your breath fall heavy and quiet. Let the words dissolve. There's no ending here, just an exhale. And maybe, if you're lucky, the sleep that finally arrives won't come from trying harder, or thinking deeper, or pushing through. Maybe it'll come because you stopped. And that's the secret, isn't it? Not everything needs to make sense, especially not at bedtime.